Revelation chapter 16, verse 2 reads, "So the first went and poured out his bowl upon the earth, and a foul and loathsome sore came upon the men who had the mark of the beast and those who worshipped his image." In this passage, we observe the commencement of the outpouring of God's wrath upon the earth, particularly targeting those who align themselves with the Antichrist, as indicated by the mark of the beast and the act of worshipping his image. This scenario unfolds during the tribulation period, a time of great turmoil prophesied to occur before the ultimate return of Christ. The bowl judgments in Revelation 16 represent the final and intense phase of God's wrath, being direct and destructive. The judgments are poured out by angels who serve as God's instruments of wrath, emphasizing the sovereignty and holiness of God in judging sin. The first angel's act of pouring his bowl upon the earth symbolizes a direct and targeted affliction designed to punish those who defy God and uphold the Antichrist. The resulting foul and loathsome sore that afflicts individuals is a physical manifestation of the spiritual corruption that marks those who reject God's sovereignty. The specificity of the judgment upon those bearing the mark of the beast and worshipping his image underlines the theme of divine retribution that is both just and specific. In biblical teaching, the decision to accept the mark of the beast is not merely a passive acquiescence, but a willful allegiance to the powers that stand against God. It represents a deliberate rejection of the truth of God for the lie of the Antichrist. Therefore, the affliction of sores is a tangible representation of the spiritual degradation that comes from such a choice. The narrative invites us to reflect on the nature of God's justice. Throughout the Scriptures, God is portrayed as being slow to anger, but also just in his dealings with humanity. His judgments are not whimsical or arbitrary, but are responses to human rebellion and wickedness. The sores described here in verse 2 remind us of the plagues of Egypt, where physical afflictions served both as punishment and as signs, pointing to the power and determination of God against those who oppose his will. This passage also challenges us to consider our own allegiances and the consequences thereof. In a world teeming with modern beasts and images, which can be understood as ideologies, systems, or leaders that demand loyalty over and above that which is due to God alone, the call of the gospel remains clear. Believers are to hold fast to the truth of Scripture, worshipping God alone and resisting the allure of worldly powers that mimic divine authority. Furthermore, the afflictions described serve as a sober reminder of the severity of God's final judgment. As believers, while we are assured of salvation through Christ, the reality of judgment upon the world should motivate us to live holy lives and to preach the gospel more fervently. The urgency to reach those who are lost in deception becomes even more pressing when we consider the eternal consequences depicted in the tribulation judgments. In practical terms, living in the light of this truth means cultivating a life of worship and obedience to God, resisting the cultural currents that would mark us for worldly allegiances. It means engaging in persistent prayer, seeking God's strength to stand firm against the spiritual deceits that pervade our world. It also involves compassionate evangelism, reaching out to those who are yet to recognize the truth of Christ, offering the hope of redemption that comes from him alone. As we reflect on Revelation chapter 16, verse 2, let it serve as a reminder not only of the future judgment, but also of the present reality of God's holiness and the serious implications of our choices. Let us commit to being people of integrity, marked not by the beast, but by the Spirit of God, living testimonies of God's grace and truth in a world that desperately needs both. This passage serves as a stern warning and a call to faithful endurance. It reminds us that God's plans are ultimately for the restoration of all things under Christ. Those who persevere in faith, resisting the deceptions of the age, look forward to a future not of judgment, but of everlasting peace and righteousness under the reign of Christ. This future hope is what sustains believers through trials and tribulations, anchoring us in the promise of God's unchanging character and his ultimate victory over evil.